What did you do? Diane Harper lived in survival mode. She worked during the day, studied at night, and still had to make sure her little sister, the only family she had left, was fed, safe, and happy. All this while trying not to get evicted with rent 3 months overdue. Kissing a man at a party was never an option until a dangerous blonde woman in a red dress put $10,000 on the table. A simple challenge, she said, and Diane thought, how much trouble can one kiss cause? The answer, a lot of trouble, especially when the man in question is Ravi greedy and he doesn't forget, doesn't forgive, and doesn't let anyone walk away unscathed. 10,001 fatal kiss. You set me up. I don't know what you're talking about. The morning had started like all the others, with the alarm going off at 5:30, and my body complaining about every sore muscle after a double shift the day before. I dragged myself out of bed and went straight to the kitchen of our tiny apartment to make breakfast for Sadie, my 10-year-old little sister, who was the only reason I kept going. She was the only light amidst all this darkness that had become my life since our parents died in that car accident 2 years ago. Di, are you working again tonight? Sadie's sleepy voice reached me as she walked into the kitchen, already dressed in her school uniform. Her brown hair was messy, and her eyes were still heavy with sleep. I forced a smile as I flipped the pancakes in the pan, trying to seem more cheerful than I actually felt. Yes, sweetie, but it is a special event this time. A charity ball that pays well, I replied, serving the pancakes on her plate and adding a bit of honey. I'll be serving drinks to rich people, and then come back home. Nothing major. Sadie ate in silence for a few seconds, before looking at me with those brown eyes, so similar to our mothers. You always work so hard, Di. When are you going to really rest? When you grow up and become that famous doctor you always talk about. Then I'll rest, I joked, ruffling her hair affectionately. Now eat up, because the bus doesn't wait. She ate a few more bites before lowering her eyes to her plate, nervously fidgeting with her fork. Di? The girls at school asked why my teeth are crooked, she murmured, so quietly I could barely hear. They said it looks like a rabbit, and they laughed at me. My heart completely shattered in that moment, and I felt a deep anger at those cruel children burn inside my chest. I took her face between my hands and made her look me in the eyes as I spoke with all the conviction I had. Sweetheart, we're going to fix that, I promise. I just need to save up the money for the dentist, but it will happen soon. But you already work so hard, she repeated with that small voice that made me want to hug her and protect her from all the evil in the world. I don't want you to get even more tired because of me. Sadie Harper, you listen to me, I said firmly, but full of love. I'll work as much as necessary, because you deserve the best in this world. Now go, before you miss the bus. After she left, I stood alone, looking at the pile of bills on the kitchen table. Rent 3 months overdue, $4,500. Sadie's full day school for the next 3 months, $2,100. Dentist quote I had gotten after calling 5 different clinics, $3,800. Total, $10,400. Impossible. Completely impossible for someone like me. Night came too quickly. Before I could process the weight of my responsibilities, I was already dressed in my waitress uniform, at the ballroom of the most luxurious hotel in the city. The charity ball was in full swing, with the entire elite gathered there, women in expensive dresses and men in impeccable tuxedos, who looked like they had walked out of some fashion magazine. I circulated through the ballroom with my tray full of champagne glasses, keeping my head down and my professional smile on, while trying not to think about how these people had so much money to spare. That is when I saw him for the first time. He was standing alone near the enormous windows overlooking the lit-up city, wearing a black tuxedo that looked custom-made. And there was something about his posture that screamed power and danger in equal doses. I passed by him with my tray, without really paying attention, because I was too focused on working, but I felt the weight of his gaze on me for a split second before I kept walking. On the other side of the ballroom, Catherine Voss observed everything with calculating eyes, and a cruel smile on her lips. She was surrounded by her equally elegant friends, all in designer dresses and jewelry that probably cost more than I would earn in my entire life. But there was something different about her that night, a dangerous tension emanating from her in waves. There, that waitress is perfect, Catherine said to her friends while discreetly pointing at me, her eyes gleaming with pure malice. Perfect for what, Catherine? One of the friends asked curiously. taking a sip of expensive champagne. For revenge, Catherine answered simply, and then her gaze shifted to Ravi Greedy, standing near the windows. Ravi humiliated me last week, remember? In front of all of you, and then she allowed herself to remember. She allowed the memory of the most brutal humiliation of her life to come back with full force. It had been exactly 1 week ago, at another equally elegant social event, when Catherine had finally gathered the courage to offer herself to Ravi more directly, after months of subtle attempts he always ignored. She had approached him in her most sensual dress, her most seductive smile, and had said in front of at least 10 people, including her own friends, Ravi, how about we go out after this event? Just the two of us, without all these boring people around. Ravi had turned to her with those dark eyes, completely cold, without any trace of interest or sympathy, and had said in a voice loud enough for everyone around to hear perfectly, Catherine, you are not worth my time, and you never will be. Stop offering yourself like this. It is pathetic, and it is starting to get embarrassing for all of us. The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine had felt her face burn with humiliation as she heard the muffled giggles from people around, including her own friends, who unsuccessfully tried to disguise their laughter. She had left that event with her dignity destroyed, and her pride irreparably wounded, and since then, the only thing she could think about was revenge. He made me look like a complete idiot in front of everyone, Catherine said now, returning to the present, with anger still boiling inside her. He called me pathetic, said I wasn't worth his time, and everyone laughed at me. All of you laughed. The friends had the decency to look ashamed, but Catherine didn't even care, because she already had a plan forming in her head. That waitress over there, the innocent one who can barely look people in the eyes, I'm going to make her kiss Ravi publicly, without his permission, in front of everyone. That's too cruel, Catherine, one of the friends murmured, but there was morbid curiosity in her voice. He was cruel to me, Catherine retorted, with pure venom in her voice, and Ravi will destroy that girl when she touches him without permission, because everyone knows he doesn't tolerate that from anyone. I'm going to watch him humiliate her the same way he humiliated me, and finally, I'll feel better. She grabbed her expensive purse and took out a thick envelope. Lend me $10,000. I'll need incentive to convince the waitress. Minutes later, I was standing in front of Catherine Voss, with no idea that I was just a pawn in her revenge game. You, waitress, what's your name? She asked, with that smile that didn't reach her eyes. Diane, ma'am. Can I get you something? I responded automatically, my tone polite and professional. Actually, Diane, I have a very interesting proposition, she said, and there was something too calculating in the way she looked at me. $10,000 in cash, if you do one very simple thing. My heart raced, because $10,000 was exactly the miracle I needed. What kind of thing? I asked cautiously, my hand gripping the tray tighter. See that man over there, in the black tuxedo, alone by the window. She discreetly pointed at Ravi. I want you to go over there and kiss him on the lips in front of everyone. I blinked several times because I surely hadn't heard right. You want me to do what? Why? Because it's fun, and because I pay well for fun, she answered with cruel simplicity, showing the envelope full of money. $10,000 here and now. You kiss him, I give you the money, you leave. Simple as that. My mind went into total overdrive. Who is he? Nobody important, just a bored rich man. Catherine lied with impressive ease. He'll find it funny, or he'll get a little mad. But for you, Diane, $10,000 is worth a stranger's temporary anger, isn't it? Or don't you need money? Because I guarantee, a waitress working 2 balls this week needs it. I felt the manipulation, but thought about Sadie, about her teeth, about the overdue rent, about school. You give me the money first. Half now, half after the kiss, she negotiated, putting $5,000 in my hand. Go. Diane, kiss him now. I took a deep breath and walked up to Ravi, with my heart beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. Each step felt like an eternity, and my mind screamed that this was insane. But I thought about Sadie, and that made me keep going. Excuse me? My voice came out low when I got close to him, and he turned with eyes so dark and piercing, I almost forgot how to breathe. Yes? He responded, with a deep voice that emanated absolute power. He was too handsome and too scary at the same time. But $10,000. Sadie needing a dentist. Rent 3 months overdue. I needed to do this. Sorry about this, I murmured quickly before leaning in and pressing my lips against his. The entire ballroom froze. Shocked silence fell over everyone like a heavy curtain. I felt his body go completely rigid under my lips, before I pulled away quickly, my face burning up. Sorry again. I really need to go. I started to speak quickly, trying to turn around, but a strong hand grabbed my wrist firmly. You're not going anywhere, he said in a voice so cold. I felt pure terror run down my spine. Who do you think you are, to touch me without permission? It was a dare. I swear that woman paid me. The words came out rushed as I pointed at Catherine. I didn't know. I didn't mean to offend. I just needed the money and she offered. Ravi looked at Catherine and something changed in his face. A dark understanding passed through those eyes, before turning back to me. What's your name? Diane Harper, I answered, trembling, trying unsuccessfully to free my wrist. Please, I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just need the money for my sister. Well, Diane Harper, you just made a fatal mistake, he said with deadly calm. Nobody touches me without permission. Nobody. And now you're going to pay for it. He looked at the security guards, who appeared immediately. Escort her out. And Catherine Voss too now. I was being dragged out when I shouted desperately, but what about the money? She owes me another $5,000. The security guard laughed cruelly. Forget the money, girl. You just signed your death sentence. You kissed Ravi Greedy, the mob boss of this city. He doesn't forgive anyone. My world completely collapsed with those words. Mob boss, Ravi Greedy. I had kissed the most dangerous man in the city, for money I wasn't even going to get, and now he was going to kill me. And Sadie would be left alone, and all because I was too stupid to see the trap. Meanwhile, back in the ballroom, Ravi held Catherine by the arm, with controlled but threatening force. You did this on purpose. Used an innocent girl to get to me. She's not so innocent. If she accepted money to kiss a stranger, Catherine retorted, trying to maintain composure, even with fear. She's a desperate waitress, and you knew exactly that, Ravi said, in a dangerously low voice. Get out of my sight, before I forget I don't hurt women. You're going after her now? The waitress? Catherine laughed desperately. That's pathetic, Ravi. Ravi approached her so threateningly that Catherine instinctively backed away. You don't talk about her. Understand? Never say her name again. Never look in her direction again. Or I'll forget my principles about not hurting women. Catherine left terrified, her revenge having failed spectacularly, and Ravi stood there, processing what had just happened, when Ezra, his brother and right-hand man, appeared at his side. Boss? What the hell happened? Everyone's saying a waitress kissed you in the middle of the ballroom, Ezra said, with genuine curiosity mixed with poorly disguised amusement. She kissed me for $10,000. Catherine set the whole thing up as revenge, Ravi explained, his voice still tense with controlled anger. And what are you going to do with her? Ezra asked, knowing his brother well enough to know this wasn't going to end simply. Find out everything about Diane Harper, and decide what to do, Ravi responded. But there was something different in his voice, that Ezra couldn't quite identify. Are you mad at her? Ezra asked cautiously. Yes, I'm furious, Ravi admitted, but then paused for a moment before continuing. But I'm also curious. Nobody's ever kissed me without fear before. She was trembling, but she still did it. It was different. Are you interested in her? Ezra asked with genuine surprise, because Ravi Greedy wasn't interested in women, especially not desperate waitresses who kissed him for money. No, I'm irritated, Ravi corrected quickly. But there was something in the way he said it that made Ezra doubt. Investigate her. I want everything about Diane Harper by tomorrow morning. Family, work, debts, everything. Got it, boss, Ezra responded, already mentally planning how to get all that information. Meanwhile, I got home at 3 a.m, in complete shock. Nancy, my best friend, got up from the couch as soon as she saw me. Di, where were you? You disappeared from the event without saying anything. I screwed up everything, Nancy, I managed to say between sobs. I kissed the mob boss for money, and now he's going to kill me. And Sadie will be left alone. You did what? Nancy practically screamed, pulling me to the couch. Explain this properly, for God's sake. I told her everything, between uncontrollable tears, from Catherine's proposition, to discovering who Ravi really was, and I saw horror grow on Nancy's face. He said I was going to pay, said nobody touches him without permission. Di, are you crying? Sadie's sleepy voice came from the hallway, and I wiped my face desperately before turning around. No, sweetie. I just had a very tiring day, I lied with a trembling voice. Go back to bed. You have school early tomorrow. Okay. I love you, Di, she said before going back to her room. I waited for the door to close, before completely breaking down in Nancy's arms. What did I do? What the hell did I do with my life? Nancy hugged me tight while I cried, but neither of us had an answer to that question. All I knew was that I had kissed Ravi Greedy, the most dangerous man in the city, and now my life would never be the same. I didn't sleep at all that night. How could I sleep, knowing that the most dangerous mob boss in the entire city was probably planning my death, while I lay on my old mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling of the apartment. Nancy had stayed with me until 5 a.m, trying to calm me down, saying that maybe Ravi Greedy would just scare me and let it go, but we both knew she was lying to make me feel better. Men like Ravi Greedy didn't forgive anyone for anything, and I had committed the supreme offense of touching him without permission, in front of dozens of witnesses. When the sun finally started to rise, I dragged myself out of bed and went to make breakfast for Sadie, as if it were just another normal day, as if my entire life wasn't crumbling around me. My little sister walked into the kitchen, with her uniform already on, and gave me that sweet smile that always made my heart squeeze, completely oblivious to the danger I had brought into our lives. "Good morning, Di. You look tired," she said, as she sat down at the table and grabbed the glass of orange juice I had just poured for her. "Just a bad night's sleep, sweetie." "Nothing major," I lied with ease, born from 2 years of practice hiding my worries from her. "Eat up, because the bus doesn't wait and you can't be late again." After Sadie left for school, I stood in the middle of the living room, trying to decide what to do with my day. Should I go to work for the afternoon shift at the restaurant like I always did? Or should I stay locked inside the apartment, waiting for men in black suits to show up and take me away? In the end, I decided to take a shower, and at least try to act like everything was normal. Because if I was going to die anyway, at least I'd die clean and with dignity. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, in a luxurious office that occupied the entire floor of an imposing skyscraper, Ezra Greedy was finishing compiling the most complete dossier he'd ever made about anyone in less than 12 hours. He had used all the resources of his brother's organization to find out absolutely everything about me, from my birth certificate to the last cent I owed everyone. And now, he was standing in front of Ravi's enormous desk, holding a thick folder full of information. "Boss, I have everything on Diane Harper," Ezra said as he placed the folder on the desk and watched his older brother with poorly disguised curiosity. Because Ravi had never requested such a detailed investigation about a woman before, Ravi picked up the folder without saying anything and started reading in silence, his dark eyes scanning each page with total attention, while Ezra stood there waiting. The first page contained basic information. Diane Harper, 23 years old, orphaned 2 years ago, after her parents died in a terrible car accident that left her and her younger sister completely alone in the world. Ravi felt something tighten in his chest when he read that part, because he knew exactly what it was like to lose your parents too young, and have to take on the responsibility of caring for younger siblings, without being prepared for it. He had been only 18 when his parents were killed in a territorial war between rival families. And suddenly, he had become responsible for Ezra, who was 12 at the time, and Liam, who was only 8 years old. He kept reading, and discovered that I worked 2 jobs to support my 10-year-old sister, that I had gone back to nursing school on a full scholarship, after having dropped everything when my parents died, and that I fought every day to keep my head above water. And then, he got to the debt part, and felt his heart tighten even more. Rent 3 months overdue, $4,500. Full day school for Sadie for the next 3 months, $2,100. Dental treatment that Sadie desperately needed, $3,800. Exact total, $10,400. Catherine had offered $10,000, only $400 less than what I desperately needed. She needed the money, Ravi said out loud after finishing reading everything, and there was something different in his tone. That made Ezra raise his eyebrows in surprise. It wasn't malice or intentional disrespect. It was pure desperation. "So, you're going to forgive her?" Ezra asked with genuine curiosity, because Ravi Greedy didn't forgive anyone for anything. It was one of his absolute rules. "No, I'm not going to forgive," Ravi answered automatically. But then he paused and looked at my photo that was stapled to the dossier. It was a photo that Ezra had gotten from my college student ID, where I was smiling shyly at the camera. "But I understand why she did what she did." He stayed silent for a long moment, just looking at that photo before opening his desk drawer and taking out a thick envelope already full of money. "Take this to her," he said, as he put $15,000 inside the envelope and closed it carefully. "Tell her it's payment for the inconvenience I caused last night." "Boss, you're getting soft," Ezra said with an amused smile on his lips, because he knew his brother well enough to know this was completely out of character for Ravi. "Shut up and go," Ravi responded, with irritation that wasn't really serious. And Ezra took the envelope, chuckling quietly as he left the office to carry out the order. It was almost 2 in the afternoon when I heard the firm knock on the apartment door, and my heart immediately raced in pure panic, because I knew no normal person knocked on the door like that. I approached, slowly, and looked through the peephole to see a tall man in a black suit standing in the hallway, and that's when I really started to panic, because this was exactly what I had feared all night. "Who is it?" I managed to ask, with my voice coming out shaky, my hand gripping the doorknob so hard my fingers were turning white. "Ezra Greedy, Ravi's brother." The voice came from the other side of the door, with a calm tone that was very different from Ravi's coldness. "I just came to deliver something to you, Diane. I didn't come to do any harm." I opened the door slowly, keeping the security chain in place, and looked at the man through the small opening. He really did look like Ravi, in his strong features and dark eyes, but there was something lighter about him, less threatening and more approachable. He was holding a white envelope and had his hands raised in a non-threatening way. "Relax, Diane. I really just came to deliver this," he repeated as he showed the envelope. "It's from Ravi, $15,000, to cover everything you needed, and a little more." I removed the chain, with my hand shaking so much I could barely open the door completely, and looked at him, unable to process what he had just said. "Why? He's not going to kill me." "I thought he said I was going to pay for what I did." "Ravi found out about Sadie and about your parents," Ezra explained, in a gentle voice as he extended the envelope to me. "He understands why you accepted Catherine's money. He also lost his parents young and had to raise his siblings alone, so he knows exactly what situation you're in." I took the envelope with my hand still shaking and opened it to see the $100 bills, perfectly organized inside, and suddenly, tears started falling from my eyes without me being able to control them. Is this real? He's really giving me this money. I don't understand anything that's happening. It's very real. And the money is all yours, with no conditions except one, Ezra said, as he watched me cry with an expression that was almost sympathetic. Ravi wants you to have dinner with him tonight. He wants you to explain everything personally. He wants to hear your story from your own mouth. A dinner? I repeated like an idiot, because that was the last thing I was expecting to hear. He wants to have dinner with me? Why? Because he's a complicated man who does complicated things, Ezra answered with a small smile. But I can guarantee he won't hurt you, Diane. My brother may be many things, but he doesn't hurt innocent women who were just trying to survive. I stood there, holding the envelope full of money that represented the solution to all my problems, and my mind raced in circles, trying to understand how my life had turned upside down in less than 24 hours. Yesterday morning, I was just a waitress struggling to survive, and now I was receiving $15,000 from the mob boss I had kissed without permission, and being invited to dinner with him. I heard my own voice say, before my brain could really process the decision. I'll have dinner with him and I'll explain everything. Great. I'll send a car to pick you up at 7 tonight, Ezra said, with clear satisfaction in his voice, before giving me a card with a phone number. If you need anything or have any problems before then, call me at this number. After he left, I closed the door and slid to the floor, still holding the envelope. And it was only then that I really started to cry for real. These weren't tears of fear this time, but rather relief, so deep it physically hurt in my chest. I opened the envelope again and counted the money with trembling hands, confirming it really was $15,000. And suddenly, I could breathe again, for the first time in months. I could pay the overdue rent and still have money left over for several months. I could guarantee Sadie's full day school without worrying. I could schedule her dentist appointment and finally end the bullying she was suffering. I could finally stop living on the constant edge of absolute desperation. But at the same time, I knew this wasn't free. Ravi Greedy had given me that money because he understood my situation, because he had lived through something similar when he was younger. But he also wanted something from me. He wanted to get to know me, wanted to hear my story, wanted to have dinner with me, and I had no idea if this was a good thing, or if I was just getting myself even deeper into a dangerous situation I'd never be able to get out of. Nancy showed up at the apartment a few hours later, and nearly had a heart attack when I showed her the money. "Where the hell did you get $15,000, Diane?" she asked, as she looked at the bills spread out on the kitchen table with wide eyes. "Ravi Greedy sent his brother to deliver it to me," I answered simply, and saw her jaw literally drop. He found out about my situation, and understood why I accepted Catherine's dare, and now he wants to have dinner with me tonight. Dinner with the mob boss? Diane, are you crazy? Nancy practically screamed as she grabbed me by the shoulders. "What if it's a trap? What if he hurts you? His brother guaranteed nothing will happen," I said, but my voice didn't sound as convinced as I would have liked. "And besides, Nancy, he gave me $15,000. I have to at least hear him out, don't I?" She looked at me for a long moment before sighing heavily and pulling me into a tight hug. "You're the bravest and most idiotic person I know. You know that, but I love you. And I'll have my phone in my hand all night, in case you need rescue." At 7 sharp, a luxurious black car stopped in front of my building, and I walked down the stairs in my best dress. That was still too simple for the kind of place where I imagined Ravi Grady dined. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears, and my hands were sweating as I got into the car, where a polite driver greeted me. As the car glided through the city streets, toward the unknown destination, I looked out the window and thought about how my life had changed completely in just one day, and I had no idea if that change would be for better or for worse. The car stopped in front of a restaurant that was clearly the type where normal people like me would never set foot, with valet parking and an elegant facade that screamed luxury and exclusivity. I got out of the vehicle with my legs trembling and followed the host, who appeared immediately to guide me through the main dining room to a private area in the back, where I knew Ravi Greedy would be waiting for me. Each step I took felt like an eternity, and my mind kept screaming that this was a terrible idea. But at the same time, I knew I had no choice but to move forward after accepting his money. The private area was an intimate space, with just one table in the center, soft lighting that created interesting shadows on the walls, and an incredible view of the city through enormous floor-to-ceiling windows. And there, sitting at the table with a glass of what looked like expensive whiskey in his hand, was Ravi Greedy, in all his intimidating glory. He was wearing an impeccable dark suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months, and when he lifted his dark eyes to look at me, I felt my heart skip an entire beat in my chest. "Diane," he said simply, his deep voice filling the space between us, as he stood up with the natural elegance of a dangerous predator. "Thank you for coming." "Didn't seem like I had much choice," I responded, before I could filter my words, and immediately regretted it when I saw one of his eyebrows raise in surprise. "Sorry, I didn't mean that to sound rude. I'm just really nervous. And when I get nervous, I say things without thinking." To my absolute surprise, he smiled slightly, but genuinely, and that smile completely transformed his face, from intimidating to absolutely devastating. "Sit," he said, as he pulled out the chair for me, with a gentlemanly gesture that seemed completely out of place, with everything I knew about mob bosses, "and relax. I don't bite. At least, not without prior warning." I sat in the chair he had pulled out for me, and he returned to his seat on the other side of the table, his eyes never leaving my face as he settled back in. The silence that fell over us was so thick I could almost touch it, loaded with tension and anticipation. And something else I couldn't quite identify. He watched me with an intensity that made my skin tingle, and I suddenly felt very conscious of every move I made, every breath I took. "Tell me about your parents," he said suddenly, breaking the silence with a question I definitely wasn't expecting to hear. I blinked several times as I tried to process his request, because talking about my parents was the last thing I imagined would happen at this dinner. "Why do you want to know about them?" I managed to ask, my voice coming out weaker than I would have liked. "Because I want to really get to know you, Diane, and getting to know someone means understanding where that person came from," he responded with a simplicity that somehow made it impossible to deny his request. "So tell me, how did they die? How did you end up raising Sadie alone?" I took a deep breath, as I gathered the courage to talk about the worst night of my life, and then the words started coming out of my mouth, as if they had a will of their own. It was 2 years ago, a car accident on the highway, when they were coming back from a weekend trip. A truck lost control and hit their car head-on, and they both died instantly without suffering much. Or, at least, that is what the doctors told me to make me feel better. Ravi didn't say anything, just kept watching me with those dark eyes, full of something that seemed dangerously close to genuine understanding, and that encouraged me to continue. I was 21 at the time, in my second year of nursing school, and had my whole life planned out ahead of me, and suddenly, I found myself as Sadie's legal guardian, when she was only 8 years old, and there was no one else to take care of her except me. "You dropped out of college," he said, and it wasn't a question, but rather a statement, based on what he already knew about me from the investigation. Yes, I dropped everything, because there was no way to balance school with 2 jobs, and still take care of a traumatized child, who had just lost her parents, I confirmed, as I felt tears starting to prick behind my eyes. I spent a whole year, just trying to keep my head above water, working as a waitress during the day, and bartender at night, making sure Sadie was fed, and safe, and not completely destroyed by the loss. "But you went back to college," he observed. And there was something like admiration in his voice that caught me completely by surprise. "I got a full scholarship last year, so I went back to studying nursing at night. After my shifts," I explained, as I nervously played with the napkin in front of me. "I fight every day to balance everything, to make sure Sadie has everything she needs, even if it means I never sleep enough, or never have time for myself. But she's my little sister, you know. She's all I have left of my family, and I would do anything for her. Including kissing a dangerous stranger for $10,000, Ravi said in a soft voice, that was so rare coming from him, that I looked up in surprise to find him watching me with an expression I couldn't completely decipher. "Including that," I admitted, with a heavy sigh. "I know it was stupid. I know it was dangerous. But when Catherine put that money in front of me, all I could think about was how it would solve all my problems at once." Ravi stayed silent for a long moment, before leaning forward with his elbows on the table, and suddenly, he was closer to me than he had been since I arrived. "I lost my parents when I was 18, he said in a voice so low. I had to lean in too to hear properly. They were killed in a territorial war between rival families, brutally murdered, just because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. My heart completely stopped in my chest, because I definitely wasn't expecting him to share something so personal with me. And suddenly, I understood why he had given me the money, and why he wanted to get to know me. "Ravi, I'm so sorry," I managed to say with absolute sincerity, and I saw something pass through his eyes that seemed dangerously close to genuine pain. "And suddenly, I became responsible for raising my younger siblings completely alone," he continued, as if I hadn't said anything. "Ezra was 12 at the time, and Liam was only 8, and I had no idea how to take care of children, while also taking control of the organization my father had left behind." "You understand," I said, with admiration and shock mixed in my voice, because it finally made sense why he had reacted the way he did when he discovered my situation. "You really understand what it's like to lose your parents too young, and have to raise siblings alone. Every second of the pain, the fear, the desperation," Ravi confirmed, as he held my gaze with an intensity that made my breath catch in my throat. "I fought every day to keep my brothers alive, and safe and happy, while also building a criminal empire that could protect us from anyone who wanted to hurt us. It was the hardest period of my life, but it also made me the man I am today." There was a pause, loaded with emotion, before he continued in that soft voice, that was so different from the cold tone he had used with me the night before. "Catherine used you, Diane. She knew exactly what she was doing when she offered you that money, but you were brave to accept her dare, even without knowing who I was. Stupid too, extremely stupid, but definitely brave." I couldn't help the nervous laugh that escaped my lips at that comment. "Thanks, I guess. I'm not sure if being called stupid and brave at the same time is a compliment or an insult." "It's a factual observation," he responded. But there was the slightest trace of humor in his eyes that completely transformed the atmosphere between us, from tense to something lighter and almost friendly. "You need to accept the money without guilt, Diane. Pay all your bills, schedule Sadie's dentist appointment, guarantee her school, and after that, let me really get to know you." "Why?" The question came out of my mouth before I could think better of it, and I saw his expression change to something more intense and focused. Why do you want to get to know me? I'm nobody important. I'm just a waitress who made the mistake of kissing you without permission. Because you kissed me without permission, Diane, he said, as he leaned even closer to me across the table. So close. I could feel the heat emanating from him and smell the masculine cologne he wore. And nobody does that and walks away unscathed, ever. But instead of punishing you, like I normally would with anyone who dared to disrespect me, I found myself wanting to get to know you, wanting to understand who the woman is who had the courage to touch me, even while trembling with fear. My heart was beating so hard now I was sure he could hear it, and I felt my face heat up with the intensity of his gaze fixed on me. I don't know if this is a good idea, Ravi. You're a mob boss and I'm just someone trying to survive. Our worlds are completely different. And maybe that is exactly why it works, he responded, with a conviction that left no room for arguments. I spend every day surrounded by people who fear me or want something from me. But you kissed me out of desperation, not greed or ambition. And when I looked into your eyes last night, I saw fear. Yes, but I also saw pure honesty. You weren't trying to manipulate or use me. You were just trying to save your little sister. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just kept looking at him while trying to process everything that was happening. Okay, I finally managed to say, my voice coming out shaky but firm. But it has to be slow, Ravi. I don't know anything about your world, and I need to protect Sadie above everything. Slow, he agreed with a small smile that completely transformed his face again. And suddenly, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I had just agreed to something that would change my life forever, in ways I still couldn't fully comprehend. The dinner continued with surprisingly easy conversation between the two of us. And when it was finally time to leave, I found myself thinking that maybe getting to know Ravi Greedy wasn't the worst thing that could have happened to me after all. A week had passed since that dinner with Ravi, and my life had changed in ways I never imagined possible. The first thing I did, the next day, was go to the real estate office and pay the 3 months of overdue rent. And the feeling of seeing the debt cleared was so intense. I almost cried right there in front of the receptionist. After that, I went to Sadie's school and guaranteed her enrollment in the full-day program for the next 6 months, without worrying if I would have enough money at the end of the month. And then, with my heart lighter than it had been in years, I called the dental office and scheduled Sadie's first appointment for the dental treatment she so desperately needed. Di, why are you smiling so much? Sadie had asked that morning, while having breakfast with me before school, her brown eyes full of innocent curiosity. You seem different, happier. Because things are finally getting better for us, sweetie, I had responded, while affectionately ruffling her hair. And next week, you're going to start treatment with the dentist. So, pretty soon, those annoying girls at school won't have anything to say about you. The way her face had lit up with that news had made every second of stress and fear completely worth it. And I found myself thinking that maybe accepting that money from Ravi hadn't been the mistake I had initially thought it was. Ravi and I had exchanged some messages during that week. Nothing too deep or serious, just casual conversations about how our day had been, or small observations about random things that had happened. It was surprisingly easy to talk to him through messages, easier than I had imagined it would be, considering who he was and the dangerous world he inhabited. But, of course, peace never lasts long for people like me, and Catherine Voss was determined to make sure my newly discovered happiness was destroyed, in the most public and humiliating way possible. She had spent that entire week consumed by fury at seeing her revenge plan fail so spectacularly. Because instead of Ravi destroying me like she had expected, he had become interested in me, in a way that left Catherine absolutely insane with jealousy and rage. So she had done what any rich, spoiled, and vindictive person would do when confronted with the failure of their plans. She had hired a photographer to follow us and take pictures of me and Ravi together during the few casual encounters we had had during that week. There were photos of us talking at the entrance of my building, when he had shown up by surprise to take me for coffee. Photos of us laughing together in a park, where we had walked for a few hours just talking about our lives, and even a photo of him holding my hand protectively as we crossed a busy street. And then, Catherine had leaked all those photos to the local tabloids, with a headline that made my stomach turn when I saw it for the first time. Mob boss with waitress, Ravi Greedy's new toy. The article that accompanied the photos was even worse, full of cruel speculation about how I was just his latest temporary conquest, and how he was probably already tired of me, but hadn't publicly discarded me yet. I was on my afternoon shift at the restaurant, when Nancy came running with her phone in her hand, and her face pale with worry. "Di, you need to see this now," she said, as she pulled me to the most isolated corner of the restaurant and showed me her phone screen, with the horrible headline plastered there. My heart completely sank in my chest as I read that article full of venom, and suddenly I felt completely exposed and vulnerable in a way I had never experienced before. "I'm a toy," I managed to say, with my voice coming out strangled, with humiliation and anger mixed together. "They're calling me his disposable toy. It's all lies, Di. Anyone who knows you and Ravi knows that's not true." Nancy tried to console me, but I could see the worry in her eyes too. "This is clearly Catherine's doing. She's trying to humiliate you because her plan failed." But knowing it was a lie didn't make the situation any less painful or less humiliating, especially when my phone started ringing incessantly, with messages from unknown numbers calling me horrible things and accusing me of being a gold digger who was using Ravi for his money. I turned off my phone with trembling hands and tried to focus on my work, but all I could think about was how my life had turned into a public circus in a matter of seconds. Meanwhile, on the other side of town in his office, Ravi was sitting at his desk, reading that same article, with an expression so cold and furious that Ezra had taken 2 steps back instinctively when he entered the room. "Boss, I'm already tracking who leaked the photos," Ezra said quickly, knowing his brother was on the verge of exploding with pure rage. "Don't need to track. I already know exactly who it was," Ravi said, in a voice so cold it could have frozen hell itself. "Catherine Voss. She hired a photographer to follow us, and then leaked everything to the tabloids, calling Diane a disposable toy." Ezra whistled softly, because he knew Catherine had just crossed a line from which there was no return. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to her house right now, and I'm going to make it very clear she just made the last mistake of her life," Ravi responded, as he got up from his chair, with controlled movements that barely hid the absolute fury burning inside him. "And then, I'm going to Diane, and I'm going to make sure she knows it's all lies." Catherine's mansion was in an extremely wealthy neighborhood, on the outskirts of the city, and when Ravi showed up at her door without warning with that murderous expression on his face, she immediately knew she had gone too far this time. "Ravi, I can explain," she started to say, as soon as she opened the door, but he cut her off with a look so cold she felt her blood freeze in her veins. "You leaked photos of me with Diane to the tabloids," he said with no inflection in his voice. And that deadly calm was much more frightening than if he had been yelling. "And you called her a disposable toy in a public headline. Isn't she?" Catherine retorted, with desperation born of fear, trying to cling to her anger as armor against the terror she was feeling. "You get tired of women quickly, Ravi. Everyone knows that. In a few weeks, you'll be bored with her, and you'll throw her away like you do with everyone." "She's different," Ravi said, with an absolute conviction that made Catherine involuntarily back away. "Diane is different from any woman I've ever met, and you're officially banned from every social event in this city. I'm going to personally make sure you're never invited to any ball, any dinner, any party again. You are going to be a social pariah, Catherine, and it is exactly what you deserve." "You loved me once," Catherine screamed, tears starting to stream down her face. Her pride was finally breaking completely under the weight of rejection. "You loved me, and now you are destroying me because of some random waitress." "I never loved you, Catherine. I never even came close," Ravi said with a casual cruelty that hurt more than any physical violence could. "You invented an entire romantic story in your head, based on absolutely nothing, and now you are paying the price for trying to destroy someone innocent, all because of your delusional fantasies." Then, he simply walked out of her mansion, without looking back. He left Catherine crying alone in the doorway as her world crumbled around her. 20 minutes later, Ravi was standing in front of my old, worn-out building. He looked so out of place with his expensive suit in that humble neighborhood. Several people stopped to stare as he climbed the stairs to my apartment. It was Sadi, who opened the door when he knocked. For the first time since all this craziness had started, Ravi found himself face to face with the little sister I talked about so much. She was small for her 10 years, with long brown hair and eyes that were exact copies of mine. When she looked at him with pure curiosity, without any trace of fear, Ravi felt something completely melt inside his chest. "Hi," Sadie said in a sweet and slightly shy voice. Her head tilted to the side as she studied the tall, intimidating stranger standing at her apartment door. "Hi, you must be Sadie," Ravi responded. To his own surprise, he found himself genuinely smiling at the girl. "I am Ravi. Your sister talked a lot about you." Sadie's eyes widened with immediate recognition. Suddenly, she was grinning from ear to ear with pure enthusiasm. "You are Mr. Ravi. Diane talked about you too. She said you are really nice, even though you are kind of scary sometimes." Ravi could not help the genuine laugh that escaped him at that completely honest comment. He found himself thinking it had been years since he had laughed so naturally and carelessly. "Can I come in? I need to talk to your sister about something important." Sadie opened the door completely, and Ravi entered the small but incredibly cozy apartment. His eyes scanned the space with interest. He noticed all the little touches that showed how much love existed there. Despite the lack of money, there were framed photos of me and Sadie scattered on the walls. Colorful drawings made by Sadie were stuck to the refrigerator with magnets. A delicious smell of homemade food came from the kitchen, making his stomach growl embarrassingly. "Ravi, what are you doing here?" My voice came from the kitchen before I appeared in the doorway. I had an apron tied around my waist and flour on my hands. My eyes were wide with surprise at seeing him standing in my living room. "He is really handsome, Diane," Sadie announced with all the subtlety of a 10-year-old. I felt my face immediately catch fire at the comment. "Sadie," I managed to say, my voice coming out strangled with embarrassment. But Ravi just laughed in that rare and beautiful way that completely transformed his face. "Thank you, Sadie. You are very pretty, too," he responded with genuine sincerity, before turning his attention back to me. "I came to talk about the photos that leaked today. Catherine hired a photographer to follow us. We spent the next hour talking, all three of us together. I watched, fascinated, as Ravi interacted with Sadie in such a natural and gentle way. It was impossible to believe he was the same feared man who commanded the entire city's mafia." He listened with genuine attention, as Sadie talked about her school, and how excited she was to start dental treatment. He even helped her with the math homework she was struggling to finish. It was in that moment, seeing Ravi sitting on my old couch with Sadie beside him, laughing at some joke he had made, that I realized I might be starting to fall in love with that dangerous man. He had entered my life in the most unexpected way possible. Diane is more in love than she wants to admit, but how long will they wait to truly declare how much they love each other? You ruined my life. The days following the leak of those photos turned into a living nightmare. I never could have imagined this, even in my worst moments of paranoia. The paparazzi had discovered where I lived, where I worked, and even where Sadie went to school. Suddenly, I could not take 2 steps down the street without being chased by photographers with huge cameras. They shouted invasive questions about my relationship with Ravi Greedy. It was absolutely maddening trying to live my normal life, while cameras recorded every move I made, every expression on my face, and every word I said to anyone who crossed my path. The worst part of it all happened 3 days after the photos leaked. I arrived for my afternoon shift at the restaurant and found my boss, Mr. Martinez, waiting for me at the back door. He had an uncomfortable expression on his face that made me immediately know something very bad was about to happen. He was a generally kind, middle-aged man, who had always been fair to me during the 2 years I had worked there. But in that moment, he seemed unable to look directly into my eyes. He nervously fidgeted with his hands. "Diane, we need to talk about your current situation," he said in a low voice full of genuine discomfort. I felt my stomach completely sink, because I knew exactly where that conversation was going. The paparazzi have been showing up here every day since those photos leaked, and it is bothering the other customers. Some people even complained that they do not want to dine in a place with so many cameras and commotion outside. "Mr. Martinez, I am so sorry. I swear I did not ask for any of this," I started to say quickly. Desperation grew inside my chest because I could not lose that job. I just could not. I can use the back door. I can arrive earlier or later to avoid the photographers. I can do anything you need, but please do not fire me. The expression on his face became even more uncomfortable. I saw genuine compassion in his eyes, mixed with the firmness of someone who had already made a decision and was not going to back down. "I am really sorry, Diane. You have always been an excellent employee, and I hate having to do this. But I have a business to run, and the scandal involving you and the mob boss is negatively affecting my other customers. I am going to pay you for 2 weeks in advance, but I need you not to come back after today. I left that restaurant in complete shock. I had 2 weeks of pay in my pocket, but I was without a steady job for the first time since my parents had died. The reality of the situation hit me like a truck at full speed. The money Ravi had given me was running out faster than I had planned, because I had paid all the overdue debts at once. Now, without one of my 2 jobs, I was back to square one financially. All of this happened because his life invaded mine in a way I had never asked for or wanted. The paparazzi followed me from the restaurant to the bus stop, shouting questions about Ravi and taking photos of my face, which was red with held-back tears. In that moment, I felt anger begin to replace the desperation inside my chest. I was angry at Catherine for having started all of this. I was angry at the photographers for not leaving me alone. But mainly, I was angry at Ravi. He had entered my life and turned everything into a public circus, without even warning me about the consequences of being associated with him. When I finally got home, after a torturous bus ride, where even the other passengers had recognized me from the photos in the tabloids, I threw my purse on the couch with more force than necessary. I grabbed my phone with hands shaking from accumulated anger and frustration. I found Ravi's number in my contact list and pressed the call button before I could think twice. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. Diane, his voice came from the other end of the line after only 2 rings. There was genuine concern in his tone that normally would have calmed me down, but in that moment, it only intensified my anger. "Are you okay? Ezra told me the paparazzi have been chasing you. Your life is destroying mine." The words burst from my mouth in a frustrated shout before I could filter anything. I heard a shocked silence on the other end of the line before he responded. "I just lost my job at the restaurant, because the boss does not want the scandal associated with me. The photographers will not leave me alone, even when I go to the grocery store. And Sadie is being harassed at school by kids wanting to know if she knows the mob boss personally. I gave you enough money to cover everything you needed," Ravi responded. There was something defensive in his tone that just threw more gasoline on the fire of my anger. "What else do you want from me, Diane? I solved all your financial problems. I want my life back," I screamed, with tears finally starting to stream down my face freely. All the frustration, fear, and stress of the past weeks finally exploded out of me at once. I did not ask to be a tabloid headline. I did not ask to be chased by photographers wherever I go. I did not ask for my 10-year-old little sister to see my picture in newspapers next to a mob boss and ask if I was in danger. "Then maybe you should have thought better before kissing me without permission," Ravi retorted. The cruelty hit me like a physical slap to the face. His pride was clearly wounded by my accusations, turning him into someone cold and distant. I needed the money. "You know that exactly," I cried, my voice breaking completely, as I let myself fall onto the old couch. My legs were trembling too much to hold me up. I did that out of desperation, not out of malice, or because I wanted attention, or because I planned to use you somehow. "And now you have the money you needed," Ravi said in that icy voice. It was so different from the gentle tone he had used with me during our encounters last week. "What is the problem then? You got what you wanted, didn't you? The problem is that your mob life is invading my completely normal life, in ways I never imagined would be possible." I exploded with renewed frustration. How could he not understand something so obvious? "Sadie saw my picture in the newspaper with you, Ravi. My 10-year-old little sister asked me if I was in danger for being involved with you. She asked if bad men were going to try to hurt us, because of your connection to me. Do you have any idea what it was like to have to look into her eyes and lie, saying everything was okay? The truth is, I do not know if everything is okay." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear his thoughts processing everything I had just said. But then, his pride apparently won over reason. He said the one thing that could have made that situation even worse than it already was. "Then maybe you should stay away from me, if my life is causing so many problems for you." I felt my heart completely shatter inside my chest with those words. Of all the things I expected him to say, that definitely was not on the list. "Great," I shouted, with all the pain and anger I was feeling vibrating in my voice. "I am so glad we have come to that understanding, Ravi Greedy. Then I hung up the phone with so much force I almost cracked the screen. I threw the device on the couch beside me, before finally letting the uncontrollable sobs take over me. Completely. I cried for having lost my job. I cried for having been turned into a tabloid headline. I cried for having put Saadi in danger unintentionally. But mainly, I cried because Ravi had just told me to stay away from him, when all I really wanted was for him to understand my situation and help me find a solution, instead of just throwing money at the problem. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, in his silent and oppressively luxurious office, Ravi was sitting at his enormous desk. He looked at the phone in his hand with an expression of growing regret, spreading across his face like spilled ink. The words he had said to me still echoed in his head with painful clarity. The more he mentally repeated them, the more he realized how completely cruel and unfair he had been. "What have I done?" he murmured to the empty office, his voice loaded with a self-recrimination that rarely appeared in Ravi Greedy. He ran his hands through his dark hair in frustration, as he finally allowed the truth of the situation to settle completely over him. Diane was absolutely right in everything she had said. He had been a complete, prideful idiot for throwing that back in her face. Instead of accepting responsibility for the consequences that her connection to him had caused, she had lost her job because of him. She was being chased by paparazzi because of him. And the little sister she loved more than anything in the world was scared and confused because of him. And what had he done when confronted with all of that? He had acted exactly like the cold, cruel man everyone expected him to be. He threw money at the problem as if that solved everything, and then told her to stay away from him, when she dared to point out that money did not solve being turned into a public spectacle. Ravi got up from his chair and started pacing back and forth across the office with agitated steps. His mind raced frantically as he tried to figure out how to fix the mess he had just made. He had hurt Diane in a way that probably would not be easily forgiven. He had said exactly the wrong thing at the wrong time, because his pride had been wounded by her accusations, even though he knew that every word she had said was completely true and justified. Now he was alone in his office at 9 o'clock at night on some random Tuesday. He looked at his phone, desperately wishing he could go back in time 15 minutes and redo that entire conversation in a way that did not end with her hanging up on him while crying. Ravi finally let himself fall back into his chair with a heavy sigh of defeat. For the first time in years, he genuinely did not know how to fix something he had broken. The worst part of it all was that he was beginning to realize that maybe he cared about Diane Harper much more than he had admitted to himself until that moment. An entire week passed without any contact between me and Ravi. Each day that dragged on felt like a painful eternity, full of regret and hurt that I could not fully process. I spent those 7 days locked inside the apartment most of the time. I only went out to take Saadi to school in the morning and pick her up in the afternoon. I avoided the paparazzi, who still showed up occasionally, but who fortunately were starting to lose interest in the story, now that Ravi and I clearly were not seeing each other anymore. Nancy had come to visit me every day, bringing food and company, but even my best friend's comforting presence could not fill the strange comforting presence that had settled in my chest since that terrible phone call. Meanwhile, in his office, Ravi was visibly in a terrible mood during that entire week. He was so irritated and distant that even his most loyal men were avoiding talking to him, unless it was absolutely necessary. Ezra had watched his older brother sink deeper and deeper into a spiral of self-recrimination and stubbornness mixed together. Finally, he decided it was time for someone to give Ravi a reality check, before he completely ruined any chance he might still have with the only woman who had managed to penetrate his emotional defenses in over a decade. "You are a complete idiot. You know that," Ezra said without beating around the bush, as he entered Ravi's office without knocking. He closed the door behind him with enough force to make the glass tremble slightly. "You are a prideful, stubborn, and completely irrational idiot." Ravi looked up from the papers he was pretending to read with an irritated expression on his face, but Ezra could see the exhaustion around his eyes and the tension lines in his jaw, indicating his brother had not slept properly in days. "If you came here just to insult me, Ezra, you can leave now because I am not in the mood." "She was completely right in everything she said to you," Ezra continued, ignoring Ravi's attempt to end the conversation before it even really started. Your life really did destroy hers. She lost her job because of the paparazzi you brought into her life. She is being constantly harassed by photographers who want more pictures of her with you. And the little sister she loves more than anything is scared because of her connection to a mob boss. I know all of this. Ravi finally exploded with frustration that had been building up during that entire miserable week. His hand hit the desk with enough force to make the papers fly. Do you think I do not know she was right? Do you think I have not spent every day since that damn phone call, hating myself for saying those horrible things to her? Then fix the situation, Ezra shouted back with a rare passion. He was tired of seeing his brother suffering when the solution was so obvious. Go to her apartment right now. Really apologize and fix everything before it is too late, and before she decides you are not worth all the stress and pain that comes with being in your life. Ravi stayed silent for a long moment, just looking at his younger brother. Then, something seemed to break inside him, and he finally admitted, out loud, the truth he had been avoiding during that entire week. What if she does not forgive me? What if I have already ruined everything irreparably? And she never wants to see me again. Then at least you tried, Ezra responded in a gentler voice, now that he had managed to penetrate his brother's defenses. But you will never know the answer if you do not go there and really try, Ravi. And I know you care about her, much more than you are admitting. So stop being stubborn and go get the woman you want. It was almost 9 at night when I heard the familiar knock on the apartment door. My heart immediately raced in my chest, because I had spent the entire week secretly hoping and fearing that Ravi would show up. I dragged myself to the door with slow, hesitant steps. When I looked through the peephole and saw him standing on the other side, I had to take several deep breaths to calm myself before I could open the door. He looked terrible, in a way that was almost satisfying. He had dark circles under his eyes, indicating he also had not slept properly. There was something broken in his expression that I had never seen before. What do you want? I managed to ask, my voice coming out colder than I actually felt. I was still too hurt to make things easy for him. I came to apologize, Ravi said immediately. His words came out fast, as if he was afraid of losing courage if he did not say everything at once. I was completely unfair and cruel to you during that call, Diane. You were absolutely right in everything you said. My life really did invade yours in ways you never asked for or deserved. And I should have protected you from all the consequences, instead of attacking you when all you were doing was pointing out the obvious truth. I felt tears start to prick behind my eyes with those words. Hearing him admit he was wrong was something I had desperately needed during that entire miserable week. Why did you say that then? Why did you tell me to stay away when all I wanted was for you to understand what I was going through? Ravi ran a hand through his dark hair in a gesture of frustration. He looked me directly in the eyes with a vulnerability so rare that it left me completely speechless. He said, I was scared, Diane. I was scared of really caring about you. I was scared of you becoming a target because of me. I was scared of admitting I was starting to feel things I had not felt in a long time. So when you confronted me with all those truths, my instinct was to attack back and push you away before I could get hurt even more. But I cannot stay away from you, he continued, his voice getting lower and more intense with each word. I tried during this entire week. I tried to convince myself it would be better for both of us if I just let you move on with your life, without me complicating everything. But the truth is, my heart broke when you hung up that phone, Diane. It broke in a way that had not happened in 16 years, since the night my parents died, and I swore to myself I would never let anyone close enough to hurt me like that again. Tears were streaming freely down my face now, as I heard him say all of that with a brutal honesty that physically hurt in my chest. Ravi, I managed to whisper through the sobs. My hand lifted involuntarily, as if wanting to reach for him, but I did not have the courage to complete the gesture. Forgive me, he asked, with a sincerity so deep it was impossible to doubt. Forgive me for being cruel. Forgive me for throwing the money in your face, as if that solved everything. Forgive me for telling you to stay away, when what I really wanted was to pull you close and promise I would truly protect you this time. Let me fix everything, Diane. Let me protect you the right way, the way I should have from the beginning. I stood there looking at him through my tears for a long moment. My heart was beating so hard I could feel the pulse throughout my entire body. Finally, I managed to find my voice again. Okay, I said simply, my voice shaky but firm in the decision. "But you have to be honest with me always, Ravi. No more attacks when you are scared or your pride is wounded. No more pushing people away when you start to care too much. We need complete honesty, or this will never work between us. I promise. Always," he said with absolute conviction. Then finally, he took a step forward and pulled me into a tight hug that made everything feel right again, despite all the mess around us. "I will always be honest with you, Diane. I promise." And as I stood there in his arms, finally allowing myself to believe that maybe we could make this work, despite all the odds, I realized that for the first time since that horrible phone call, I could breathe completely again. They were now happier than ever before, but things were going to get a little worse before they got better for good. Things between me and Ravi had finally started to stabilize. After that night when he showed up at my apartment apologizing, with a vulnerability I had never seen in him before, we had spent the last 2 weeks rebuilding the trust that had been broken during that horrible phone call. He had been incredibly patient with me while I processed everything that had happened. I tried to find a balance between my normal life and his presence, which naturally brought complications I was still learning to navigate. He had even hired discreet security to keep the paparazzi away from me and Saudi. For the first time in weeks, I could walk down the street without being chased by cameras and invasive questions. I had gotten another job at a smaller bar on the other side of town. It was a quieter place, and the owner did not care about tabloid scandals, as long as I did my job right and kept the customers happy. The pay was not as good as at the previous restaurant, but it was enough to supplement the money Ravi had given me. It ensured that Saudi and I could live comfortably without the constant stress of overdue bills. Nancy worked at the same bar as me now. Having my best friend by my side during the long shifts made everything much more bearable, and even fun sometimes. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, in her empty and increasingly isolated mansion, Catherine Voss was sinking deeper and deeper into a spiral of sick obsession and absolute desperation. It was consuming every piece of rationality she might still have. She had spent the last few weeks completely banned from all the important social events in the city, exactly as Ravi had promised. The humiliation of being treated like a pariah by the same elite that used to consider her part of the inner circle was destroying her, in ways that went far beyond wounded pride. But instead of accepting defeat and moving on with her life, Catherine had fixated even more intensely on the idea that everything would be different if she could just get me out of the way somehow. So, she made the most desperate and dangerous decision of her life up to that point. She hired 2 men through obscure contacts she had managed to get after a lot of searching. These were men who had no loyalty to Ravi, and who were willing to do anything for enough money. The instructions she gave them were specific and carefully planned. Catherine was not completely stupid, and she knew that if something really bad had happened to me, Ravi would kill her without hesitation. Instead of ordering them to physically hurt me, she simply asked them to scare me enough to make me realize that being with Ravi was too dangerous. She wanted me to end things with him before something worse happened. It was a particularly cold Thursday night when I finished my shift at the bar at 10 o'clock. I left through the back door like I always did, pulling my thin coat tighter around my body as I walked toward the bus stop 2 blocks away. The street was strangely empty for that hour, and I felt a shiver of discomfort run up my spine, without even understanding why. My instincts told me something was wrong, even though I could not identify what specifically. I quickened my steps almost without realizing it. My eyes scanned the shadows around me as my heart started beating faster in my chest. That is when they appeared, suddenly coming out of a dark alley. 2 huge men wearing dark clothes completely blocked my path with their intimidating presence. I froze in place, my heart racing in absolute panic. My mind raced frantically as I tried to decide whether to scream for help or run in the opposite direction. But my feet seemed glued to the ground by adrenaline, and fear paralyzed my entire body. One of the men took a step forward with a threatening expression on his face that made my stomach turn. When he opened his mouth to speak, his voice came out low and loaded with implicit menace. "Ravi Greedy is not for you, girl," he said, as he took another step in my direction. He forced me to instinctively back away, even though I knew there was nowhere to run. "Stay away from him, or next time we will not be so nice." But he never got to finish the sentence, because suddenly, Ravi appeared out of nowhere with a speed and ferocity I had never seen in him before. His movements were so fast and precise that the two men barely had time to react before he was on top of them. The fury on Ravi's face was absolutely terrifying to see. His dark eyes burned with a rage, so intense it seemed capable of setting fire to everything around. I vaguely realized this was the first time I was seeing the real Ravi Greedy, the feared mob boss who controlled the entire city with an iron fist. "Who sent you?" Ravi roared as he grabbed one of the men by the throat and pressed him against the wall of the nearest building with enough force to make the man choke. Who was stupid enough to dare threaten her? The man struggled to breathe for a few seconds before finally managing to stutter an answer in a hoarse, terrified voice. "Catherine Voss. It was Catherine Voss who hired us. She just wanted us to scare the girl. Nothing more, I swear." Ravi's expression somehow became even more terrifying with that confirmation. Then he simply started beating the two men with a controlled brutality, making it clear he knew exactly how to hurt someone without actually killing them. I watched it all happen in a state of shock, unable to look away, even though I desperately wanted not to see that violence. It was only when Ravi finally stopped and let the two men fall to the ground, groaning in pain, that I could breathe again. "Never touch her again," Ravi shouted at the men, who were already crawling away as fast as they could, considering their injured conditions. "And tell Catherine Voss she just signed her own death sentence." Then he turned to me, his breathing still rapid from adrenaline and rage. But when his eyes met mine, all that fury seemed to instantly dissipate, replaced by pure concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, as he quickly came in my direction and held me by the shoulders with hands that trembled slightly. "Did they hurt you? Did they touch you? Were you following me?" I managed to ask, my voice shaky. My brain finally processed the fact that Ravi had appeared too quickly for it to be a coincidence. "You have been following me this whole time without telling me." "I was protecting you, not following," Ravi corrected firmly as he pulled me into a tight hug. It made my entire body relax against him involuntarily. I knew Catherine was getting more and more desperate. I knew she would eventually try something. So I put security on you without telling you, because I knew you would not like it. "You should have told me," I protested, even as I buried my face in his chest. My voice was muffled by the fabric of his coat, but still loaded with frustration. "You cannot just make decisions about my safety without consulting me first, Ravi. And would you have accepted protection if I had asked?" he retorted with annoyingly solid logic. I felt my indignation wilt a bit, because we both knew what the answer to that question would be. "No," I admitted reluctantly against his chest. My hands clung to his coat as if he were the only solid thing in a world that had just turned upside down again. "Exactly," Ravi said in a softer voice now. He brushed my hair away from my face with gentle fingers that contrasted completely with the violence he had demonstrated just minutes before. "You are safe now, Diane. You will always be safe, because I am never going to let anything bad happen to you again. I promise." 20 minutes later, after Ravi had made sure I was really okay and had put me in a car with a driver to take me home safely, he was standing in front of Catherine's mansion for the last time. He did not even bother knocking on the door. He simply kicked it down with a strong kick that made the expensive wood shatter. Catherine appeared at the top of the staircase, her eyes wide with absolute terror at seeing him there. "You hired men to threaten Diane," Ravi said with a deadly calm that was much more frightening than any scream could have been. His steps echoed in the empty hall as he approached the staircase. "That is a line you do not cross, Catherine, ever. I just wanted her to realize you are too dangerous for her," Catherine screamed with desperation. Tears started to stream down her face as she instinctively backed away. "I just wanted—" "I do not care what you wanted," Ravi interrupted her with absolute coldness. He climbed the staircase with measured and threatening steps. "You have 24 hours to leave this city, Catherine. You have 24 hours to pack your things and disappear forever. Because if I see you after that deadline, or if I even hear that you are still here, the sky will fall on your head." Catherine frantically nodded her head. The terror was so evident on her face that she looked about to faint. Ravi simply turned and left the mansion without looking back. The next morning, Catherine Voss had completely disappeared from the city, and no one ever heard from her again. I could finally breathe, knowing that threat had been eliminated from our lives forever. 3 months had passed since that terrifying night, when the men hired by Catherine had cornered me on the street. My life had transformed in ways I never would have imagined possible, back when I was just a desperate waitress trying to survive. Ravi and I were officially dating now. We were not just getting to know each other or testing the waters, but we were really committed to each other in a way that scared and excited me in equal measures. He had become an essential part of my life, and Sadi's life too. Watching the relationship between them develop had been one of the most beautiful things I had ever witnessed. The first big change happened when Ravi personally took Sadi to her first dentist appointment. He insisted he wanted to be there to support her, through something he knew made her nervous. I had gone along, of course, but having Ravi there holding her hand in the waiting room and talking to her about random things to distract her made my heart completely melt. The treatment had taken a few months, with regular appointments. Now her teeth were perfectly aligned, and her smile had become confident in a way that made me want to cry with happiness every time I saw her. The best part of all was that the bullying at school had stopped completely. The same girls who used to mock her about her crooked teeth were now impressed with how pretty she looked. Sadi had even made some new friends, who really cared about her for the incredible person she was, and not for what her teeth looked like. But what had really cemented Ravi's place in my little sister's heart was the fact that he picked her up from school at least twice a week. He took her for ice cream before bringing her home. Those simple outings had become her favorite part of the week. It was a particularly beautiful Saturday afternoon. I was in the kitchen preparing lunch when I heard Sadi and Ravi arriving after another one of their ice cream expeditions. Their voices mixed in an animated conversation about some new movie that had premiered in theaters. I smiled to myself as I stirred the pot on the stove, my heart warming with the natural ease that had developed between them. Then, Sadi walked into the kitchen, practically bouncing with excitement. She had chocolate stains around her mouth that indicated which flavor she had chosen this time. "Diane, are you going to marry Mr. Ravi?" Sadi asked without any warning, as she jumped up to sit on the kitchen counter. She happily swung her legs as she looked at me with those brown eyes full of innocent curiosity and obvious hope. I felt my face instantly catch fire at the completely unexpected question. I almost dropped the spoon I was using to stir the food. "Sadi, we are just dating. We are not planning a wedding yet," I managed to say, my voice coming out higher than normal. I was completely mortified, especially because I could hear Ravi's muffled laughter coming from the living room where he was waiting. "But he is perfect for you, Diane," Sadi insisted with all the absolute conviction of a 10-year-old. She thought she completely understood how adult relationships worked. "He makes you happy. He is kind to you. He takes me for ice cream every week, and he even helps you wash the dishes after dinner without complaining. That is true love." I could not help the laugh that escaped my lips at that childish, but somehow completely solid logic. "You only like him because of the ice cream. Is that it?" I joked as I wiped the chocolate stains from her face with a damp cloth. My heart was overflowing with love for that incredible girl who was my little sister. "It is not just because of the ice cream," Sadi said with a sudden seriousness that caught me by surprise. Her eyes looked at me with a wisdom that seemed far beyond her 10 years. "It is because he makes you really smile, Diane. You did not smile before he showed up. You were always so tired and worried. I could see you were sad, even when you tried to hide it from me. But now you really smile, and your eyes sparkle when you look at him, and you finally seem happy." Tears began to form in my eyes at those honest and sweet words. I pulled Sadi into a tight hug as I let a few tears flow freely. "I love you so much, Sadi," I managed to say, my voice choked with emotion. "You are the most special person in the whole world." "I love you too, Diane," Sadi responded as she hugged me back hard, "and I love Mr. Ravi too. He is like the big brother I always wanted to have. Or like a father. But that would be weird to say, so I will stick with big brother." Ravi appeared in the kitchen doorway at that moment. His expression was so full of pure emotion that my heart almost stopped beating completely. He had heard everything Sadi had just said, and there were tears shining in the corners of his dark eyes. They were normally so controlled and guarded. Sadi jumped off the counter and ran to him for a hug. He returned it with a gentleness that contrasted completely with the tough image the rest of the world had of him. 2 weeks after that day, Ravi finally took me to meet his brothers at a dinner at his huge house, which I had only visited a few times before. I was incredibly nervous during the entire drive there. My hands were sweating as I tried to convince myself that Ezra and Liam would like me, despite all the strange circumstances of how Ravi and I had met. Ravi held my hand during the entire car ride. His thumb made comforting circles on the back of my hand as he assured me everything would be okay. I already knew Ezra, of course, since the day when he showed up at my apartment to deliver the money and the invitation to dinner. But Liam was a complete unknown to me. When we entered the mansion's living room, I saw a younger man with the same characteristic dark eyes of the greedy brothers. He looked at me with a huge smile, and I immediately knew this was the youngest brother Ravi spoke about so fondly. "So, you are the famous Diane Harper," Liam said as he got up from the couch and came toward me with contagious energy. "You are the girl who kissed our older brother, without permission, in the middle of a charity ball, in front of everyone." I felt my face immediately catch fire at that direct description of our disastrous first encounter. "I can explain that," I started to say, my voice coming out strangled with embarrassment, but Liam just laughed with genuine amusement. "Relax. It is completely legendary," Liam said as he pulled me into a quick hug that caught me completely by surprise. Nobody has ever done that before. Nobody has ever had the courage to touch Ravi without permission, much less kiss him publicly. "You are like a hero in the city's social circles now, and our brother is completely obsessed with you," Ezra added from the other side of the room with an amused smile. He watched Ravi roll his eyes with feigned irritation. "It is really very cute to watch, considering that before you showed up, he was practically an emotional robot." "Shut up, you two," Ravi said with no real heat in his voice, but I could see the slightest trace of a smile at the corners of his mouth as he pulled me closer to him protectively. Then I found myself really laughing, for the first time since I had arrived there. All my nervousness dissipated as I realized Ravi's brothers were genuinely good people. They clearly cared a lot about him and seemed willing to accept me into their family. The dinner went on with easy conversations and constant laughter. When it was finally time to leave, I felt happier and more complete than I had felt in years. Ravi took me home that night and kissed me at my apartment door, with a tenderness that made my heart completely melt. "Thank you for giving me a chance," he whispered against my lips. "Thank you for letting me be part of your life and Sadi's life." "Thank you for coming into our lives," I responded with absolute sincerity, "and thank you for making us truly happy." An entire year had passed since that night at the charity ball, when I had committed the stupidest, and yet most transformative, mistake of my life by kissing Ravi Greedy without permission. 12 months of changes so profound that sometimes I barely recognized the woman I had become. I was so different from that desperate waitress who worked 2 jobs and lived on the constant edge of financial and emotional collapse. Today was a particularly special day because I was about to graduate from nursing school, after years of struggling to balance work, studies, and taking care of Sadi. The graduation ceremony took place in a large university auditorium, with hundreds of people in the audience. When my name was called and I went up on stage to receive my diploma, I heard Ravi's voice shouting my name from the audience. His pride was so evident, it made my heart overflow with happiness. I looked to where he was sitting with Sadi beside him. Both of them were standing and applauding enthusiastically. I felt tears of joy start to stream down my face as I held that piece of paper, which represented so much sacrifice and determination. After the ceremony, Ravi pulled me into a tight hug and kissed me with an intensity that made my stomach flip. "I am so proud of you," he murmured against my lips as he held my face between his hands. "You fought so hard for this, worked so hard, and now you finally did it." Sadi, who was now 11 and growing too fast for my liking, jumped into my arms with a hug that almost knocked me down. "You are the most amazing nurse in the world, Diane," she shouted with that pure enthusiasm that only children can have. I laughed as I hugged her back hard. The relationship between me and Ravi was more solid than ever. It was built on a foundation of genuine trust and true love. We had survived public scandals, Catherine's threats, and all the natural challenges of mixing 2 very different worlds. He had become an essential part of my life and Sadi's life. I could no longer imagine existing without him by my side. Meanwhile, at his mansion that same afternoon, Ravi was absolutely nervous, in a way Ezra had never seen before. He was pacing back and forth across the office with agitated steps. His hands trembled slightly as he checked the small velvet box in the inner pocket of his jacket for the 10th time in 5 minutes. Ezra watched it all with poorly disguised amusement. Seeing his normally controlled and relentless older brother completely undone by nervousness was something rare and precious. "Boss, you are shaking," Ezra finally pointed out with an amused smile on his lips. He was unable to resist the temptation to tease his brother a little. "I have never seen you this nervous. Not even when we were facing that territorial war 3 years ago." "What if she says no?" Ravi asked for the 5th time that hour. His voice was loaded with a vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to see. "What if she thinks it is too soon, or that my life is too complicated, or that she does not want to marry someone like me?" "She will not say no," Ezra responded with absolute conviction. He got up from the couch to put a comforting hand on his brother's shoulder. "She loves you, Ravi. Anyone who looks at the two of you together can see that clearly. So stop worrying, and go make that proposal." A few hours later, I was sitting at the dinner table in my apartment, with Sadi beside me and Ravi across from me. All of us were finishing the dessert I had prepared, especially to celebrate my graduation. The atmosphere was light and happy, full of conversations about future plans and memories from the past year. I felt so completely content. It seemed impossible to be happier than I already was. "Diane, I have something to ask you," Ravi said suddenly, in a voice that had become a bit more serious. I looked up to find him watching me with an intensity that made my heart race. "What is it?" I asked curiously as I put my fork on my plate, having no idea what was about to happen. Then, Ravi got up from his chair. To my complete surprise, he knelt beside the table, taking a small velvet box from his pocket. Sadi let out a muffled scream of excitement beside me. My heart completely stopped in my chest as I looked at him with wide eyes, barely able to believe what I was seeing. "You kissed me for $10,000 exactly 1 year ago." Ravi began with his voice trembling with emotion, as he opened the box to reveal the most beautiful ring I had ever seen in my life. And that was simultaneously the worst and best moment of my life. It was the worst because I was furious that someone dared to touch me without permission. But it was the best because that kiss brought you into my life, in a way that changed absolutely everything. Tears were already streaming freely down my face as I listened to every word coming out of his mouth. My hand was covering my mouth in shock and joy mixed together. "You taught me to feel again, Diane," he continued, with his own tears shining in his eyes. "You gave me a real family again, after years of living only to protect my brothers, without allowing anyone else into my heart, and I love you more than I thought it would be possible to love someone. So, will you marry me? Let me spend the rest of my life making you happy?" "Yes," I screamed through the sobs, not even able to form complete sentences through the emotion overflowing from me. "Yes, always, yes." Ravi put the ring on my finger with hands that trembled slightly. And then, Sadie was screaming with absolute joy as she jumped from her chair. "I'm going to have a real big brother now," she practically yelled as she threw herself into Ravi's arms. He laughed as he hugged her tight, and then he pulled me into the hug too. The 3 of us were united there, in the middle of the small kitchen of my humble apartment, and Ravi whispered against my hair in a voice full of pure happiness, "Family finally complete." Chapter 10. Wedding and Happy Ending. I'm ready. 6 months after that perfect marriage proposal in my apartment kitchen, I was standing in front of the mirror, in a luxurious room at Ravi's mansion. I was looking at my reflection in a simple but absolutely beautiful wedding dress that Ravi had insisted on paying for, despite my protests. Nancy was beside me, fixing my veil with tears in her eyes, and Sadie was spinning around the room in her light blue flower girl dress that made her look like a little princess straight out of some fairy tale. "You look beautiful, Diane," Nancy said, her voice choked with emotion as she hugged me carefully, so as not to wrinkle my dress. "You look so beautiful. I can't even believe the same girl who was crying on my shoulder, thinking she was going to die a year ago, is about to marry the man she thought was going to kill her." I laughed through my own tears as I returned my best friend's hug. My heart was overflowing with gratitude for everything that had happened to bring me to that moment. The wedding would be small and intimate, exactly as Ravi and I wanted. Only the most important people in our lives gathered in his mansion's garden, to witness the union of 2 orphans who had found family in each other. When the music started playing, I began walking down the makeshift aisle between the white chairs in the garden. My eyes met Ravi standing at the end of the path, and everything else simply disappeared around us. He was devastatingly handsome in his impeccable tuxedo, with Ezra and Liam beside him as groomsmen. But it was the expression on his face that completely stole my breath. He was looking at me as if I were the most precious thing he had ever seen, and there were tears shining in the corners of those dark eyes that rarely showed so much emotion. When I finally reached his side, and he held my hands between his, I felt I was exactly where I should be. It felt as if my entire life had been a journey, leading to that perfect moment. The officiant began the ceremony, but I could barely pay attention to anything besides the man in front of me, until it was time for the vows. "You kissed me without permission," Ravi began, his voice firm but loaded with emotion as he held my hands tighter. "And you stole my heart in a way I never thought possible. I promise to always protect you, to love you with everything I have, and to be the best father I can be to Sadie. Always." Tears streamed freely down my face as I looked at him. And then, it was my turn to speak through the sobs. "You were the most feared man in the entire city. But with me, you were always gentle, protective, and incredibly sweet. I love you more than words can express. I promise to be your partner in everything. Your family forever, and to love you in every moment of our lives forever. I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant announced with a huge smile. And before he could finish speaking, Ravi was already pulling me into a kiss that made my entire world spin. The reception was a joyful celebration, full of laughter and love. And it was during the party that Sadie approached Ravi, with a serious expression on her face that contrasted with all the joy around. "Now you're officially my brother?" she asked, with that direct honesty only children have, looking at him with obvious hope in her eyes. "Yes, officially," Ravi responded with a genuine smile as he crouched down to her height. "So, can I just call you Ravi now, without the mister?" Sadie asked, with growing enthusiasm. Ravi felt something completely melt inside his chest with that question. "Yes, you can, little one. Cool," Sadie practically screamed, before throwing herself into his arms in a tight hug. "I love you, Ravi." And then, for the first time in years since his parents had died, Ravi greatly cried openly as he hugged that girl, who had become his real little sister. "I love you too, Sadie," he managed to say, with his voice choked, later that night. When we finally had a few minutes, alone in the garden, illuminated by soft lights, I leaned against Ravi and smiled, thinking about everything that had happened. Who would have thought all this started because of a $10,000 kiss? I commented, with humor in my voice. "Best investment of my life," Ravi responded as he pulled me closer to him. "Catherine didn't even pay the full $10,000, remember?" I said, laughing. "She only gave me $5,000. "No, she didn't pay," Ravi agreed with a smile on his lips. "But I paid much more than $10,000. I paid with my entire heart." And then, he kissed me with a tenderness that made my heart completely melt. "Best payment ever," I whispered against his lips. 2 years passed at an impressive speed. And suddenly I was in the huge living room of our new house. Sadie, who was now 13, was holding Noah, our 1-year-old son, who had his father's dark eyes and my smile. Ravi was sitting on the couch beside me, and the scene was of such perfect domestic happiness that sometimes I still had trouble believing this was my life. "Diane, do you remember when you cried, thinking Ravi was going to kill you?" Sadie asked suddenly, in that teenage way of bringing up random subjects out of nowhere. She made faces at Noah, who laughed with that delicious baby laugh. "Yes, I remember perfectly," I responded, laughing. "I was absolutely terrified, thinking my life was over, and now he's your husband, and Noah's dad," Sadie said with genuine admiration in her voice. "And my annoying big brother, who won't let me date until I'm 30. "Exactly," Ravi said with a mischievous smile, as he put his arm around my shoulders. "And I'm going to be even more annoying when you actually want to date." "Ravi," Sadie protested, as we all burst into laughter. The final thought came, and it was impossible to contain it. She had kissed him for $10,000. He had wanted to destroy her, but his heart broke when he learned the truth. 2 orphans who raised siblings alone. 2 fighters who found love where they least expected it. A family they chose to create together, Ravi and Diane. A kiss that changed absolutely everything. The kiss of our lives. And now, let's learn some fun facts about this story. How about that? Catherine never paid the full $10,000. She only delivered $5,000 before the kiss, and disappeared before paying the second half. The exact amount Diane needed was $10,400, but Catherine only offered $10,000. she would still be $400 short. Even if Catherine paid everything, Ravi gave $15,000 to Diane, not $10,000. He covered her debts and gave extra. Exactly 16 years passed, between the death of Ravi's parents and the moment his heart broke again for someone. It was the same time he spent without feeling that pain. The restaurant manager who fired Diane was named Mr. Martinez, and he paid her 2 weeks in advance, even while dismissing her. Ravi picked Sadie up from school exactly twice a week for ice cream. It became a sacred tradition between them. Their ages when they became responsible were mirrored. Ravi was 18, raising Ezra at 12, and Liam at 8. Meanwhile, Diane was 21, raising Sadie at only 8 years old. Nancy originally worked at the night bar with Diane, and then went along when she got a job at the smaller bar on the other side of town.